I think if we already pre-assume what someone's going to think or say, and that stops us from acting, then that's a terrible tragedy because, you need to give people a chance. My name is Imbi Neeme. I'm the author of Kind of, Sort of, Maybe, but Probably Not, published by Penguin Random House Australia. Phoebe Cotton is a librarian in her mid-20s who has all but retreated from the world because she suffers from a condition called misophonia. She doesn't actually know that that's the name of the condition because it's not a spoiler, but it didn't have a name back in the mid-90s. It wasn't named until the early 2000s. So she's living with this affliction pre-internet, thinking that it's just her, and the condition is an absolute abhorrence or even like an extreme overreaction to small noises, usually centered around eating, but it could be clicking or sniffing. Basically, any noise a human being can make is a trigger for poor Phoebe Cotton. And so she thinks she's the only person on the planet who feels this way about these noises. So she really thinks that she's a monster. And in terms of the name, I don't know. It just sprung from me. The book started in a very different place. Originally, Phoebe Cotton was much older, and she'd had a husband and a son who had died on board a plane in Japan. And I started this book before COVID, and then I came back to it during COVID, and I looked at it and thought, this is miserable. I can't write about this now when everything is so uncertain and there's so much shouting and mistrust and distrust and all the different trusts. And I thought, I need to shift this to something that I enjoy coming back to rather than, more misery, but just a different flavour. So that's why I kind of shifted it to the 90s and made Phoebe much younger. Suze is very different. She lives on the other side of the Maribyrnong from Phoebe Cotton. So Phoebe Cotton is living in West Footscray. And Suze lives in Fitzroy in a 90s share house on Moore Street. The number of people who come up to me and said, I've lived in that share house. I'm pretty certain I was on Moore Street. And what number was it? I think roughly 75% of the Melbourne population lived on Moore Street at some point. So she is getting a master's in procrastination while doing her honours dissertation. She's very good at not studying, and she's hopelessly in love with I can't think of the word to describe Jay other than he's a wanker. But she loves him with all her heart, and she wants so much for him to be her boyfriend. And he's just a little bit more interested in himself than he is in her. Without spoilers, Phoebe begins to receive postcards from Europe, beautifully written, poetic, I would even say. They've been misaddressed, so they're addressed to someone called Elizabeth Winston. It feels very voyeuristic for her to keep reading these quite intimate postcards, but at the same time, she doesn't feel like she can destroy them because maybe that's going to be breaking some kind of rule. She's a librarian, so she knows about rules. So she takes them to the post office, and that's where she meets Monty, who's behind the counter and clearly hopeless at his job. But he gets embroiled in this little mystery about these postcards. Who's writing them? Who are they for? I think sometimes you can get caught up in the mystery of something and forget their actual real life implications, or this were people's lives. It's not just a story in a book. And I think, we all fall foul of that, particularly on the internet. I find myself falling down these sort of rabbit holes where I'm reading an argument between two strangers at 3 o'clock in the morning, and and I'm kind of getting really embroiled. And I think these are actual people. They're not there for my entertainment. And maybe I should just back off, give them some space to work it out and stop being part of the problem. as I said about Phoebe, she has withdrawn from the world with this belief that she is secretly a monster, because she gets so angry at the noises that people make simply being human beings. You know, they're just making human noises. Um, and I think for Phoebe, when I write, I always have some kind of mantra or mission statement, to sound a bit corporate, for each main character. And for Phoebe, it was be brave. Whereas Sue's, it was be strong. And it was interesting to think, oh, well, on the surface, like being brave and being strong, are they that different? And they are quite different. And I think for Phoebe Cotton, her journey is about taking a risk. And she's had bad experiences in the past with friendships, perhaps not actual problems, but problems that she herself perceived. And I think it's, I'm always interested in writing about how different characters perceive each other and themselves, and the gap that often falls in between that. And so for Phoebe, there is some recalibrating of the past, not just her past, but her family's past. And there's, I think, in doing so, there is that opening up for the future. And I think it really is a book about people of a certain age, the kind of sort of maybe, but probably not age, where everything feels up for grabs, and you're separating from your parents and you're heading towards true adulthood, although who's really truly an adult? And I feel that is where we see her and Suze at the end is actually entering their adulthood. So I'm not sure if that answers your question, but it answers a question. Phoebe's advice would be not to assume what the other person is thinking, because she doesn't share her terrible secret because she already has answered, or she's already assumed their reaction will be absolute disgust or horror, or like, yeah, just they'll judge her. And when she finally does get a chance to tell this terrible secret, that's not what she gets. And I think that's a good lesson for her. And there's often, I think, if we already pre-assume what someone's going to think or say, and that stops us from acting, then that's a terrible tragedy, because, you need to give people a chance. They may react badly, but we need to give them a chance to react, and not, write the script in our heads and never act. Suze would be giving the advice of don't give away your self-esteem. Don't give it to someone else. I think I spent all of my 20s looking at other people, particularly boys, and I will call them boys. They weren't men yet, and I certainly was not a woman yet. But giving away my self-worth, expecting them to reflect it back at me rather than finding it in myself. And I really feel that that's what Suze needs to do, is to be strong and to kind of have a stronger grip on her own self-worth. Librarians are really the best people. I've always had librarian friends. I don't know what it is. I'm like, without ever being a librarian myself, I attract them like magnets. They hate me because I arrange my books by color, because I have that kind of visual memory, and they're just like, really, I mean, I don't think they'll ever forgive me, but they're still my friend anyway, so I'm grateful, because they are great people. And I know that libraries these days, they're kind of not just places to get books, they're also, they play a very important role within a community, in providing services other than, the latest book on aromatherapy, that we are, I don't think we stop and acknowledge strongly enough. The whole idea for the book came from this postcard. I'll just hold it up for the camera, from Malta, and it was misaddressed. It came to a place I was renting a few years back, and I didn't know what to do with it. And I started thinking, well, what if they keep coming? I mean, it's quite a innocuous, sort of very like, oh, we just, the plane trip was long. But what if they kept coming and they were got more and more intimate? And then what would I do with them? So as a young girl, my dad got a Churchill Fellowship and he went round Europe visiting theatres. And he sent me a postcard, myself and my sister, but I've somehow had ownership of the postcards, sent a postcard every week. So I've always kept those. They were such treasured objects, had the picture and the, in the days where you can't send an email or do a Facebook post or Instagram, just to have that thing of where my dad was, and delightful, writing in all caps on the back. It's just beautiful. That's got the donkey on it from Scarborough. So I kept them all, and I didn't use all of them for the book, but I became obsessed with owning every single postcard that is mentioned in the book. So I started buying bulk lots of unused European postcards, and I also started looking for very specific postcards. So I really wanted one which was the Bridge of Sighs in Venice, and I really wanted the Ile d'If, where the prison is on the little island in France. And so, I think if you were to look at my search history, you would find many sort of surprising things. But yeah, bulk lot European 70s postcards is something that I've searched a lot over the last couple of years. I don't have a lot of time in my day-to-day life to devote to writing. I do have lots of little pockets of time in my life to devote to thinking and dreaming. So the actual writing time is very short. It's sometimes there'll be a word count, 250 words, or it'll be half an hour when I'm doing sort of revising. And I'll do that in the morning, and I'll do it every day, sometimes a little longer if I've got time, but mostly I don't. And it's partly to give myself permission to, well, I'm very goal oriented. So by having those little targets, I'm like, I've done it, and now I have to move on and get on with the rest of my day. Because if I don't do that and I don't have a target, and it's all sort of, I just sort of like drifting from that into my regular life, I will hate my regular life and every single person and activity that keeps me from writing. But by somehow kind of putting a little cap on it, I'm able to go, okay, I've done it. And then it's always in the front of my head. So when I'm in traffic or I'm in a very boring meeting, doesn't happen often, does actually happen often, then I can actually just sit and think about what I'll write tomorrow. And so it just keeps it churning and developing like a, I don't know, like a soup that you've got on simmer for, very low temperature. Oh, I've got so much advice. I'm one of those really annoying people who gives advice. I think people are afraid to say that they are a writer. I think because there is this sort of misconception, I think, in non-writers of like, oh, well, what did you publish, or where have you been published? And actually, I think there needs to be a different word for people who are published. And because a writer is someone who writes, and that's got to be the thing. That's got to be the thing that you want to do, more than getting published and more than, all the money that you definitely don't get from being published, unless, you happen to be Leanne Moriarty or Trent Dalton. But the thing is, if you write, you're a writer. And sometimes even just thinking about writing is writing adjacent, still a writer. So, stand by your words, stand by your work, say you're a writer with pride, correct the people who are like, oh, so where are you published? Like, no, that's a different thing. I write, I'm a writer, and I think that's my main advice. At the moment, I'm rekindling my relationship with the manuscript I started at the beginning of last year, but for various of reasons haven't had the time to spend on it. So I am, we're getting to know each other at the moment. It's set in a dog park, and we bought a dog about two, 3 years ago, and the life of dogs. And I mean, I had dogs when I was a kid, but being an adult and having a dog and the things that dog gives me and the world that that dog has opened up for me, I am eternally grateful to Corky Sinclair, our Groodle. He is the best boy. He won't feature in the book because I don't want to give him a big head, but there will be lots of dogs in the book and lots of people with dogs. And I'm really, really enjoying the idea of getting back to it. But let's see how it goes when I actually start writing it. And thank you, and thank you for all the support that you give Australian writers, and just and this beautiful space full of beautiful books.